this supervisor, and I know I'm rambling now, but this supervisor gave me when I was working for the phone company. First, she gave me a statue about this big, and it was a woman with a boy sitting on his lap. The next week, she gave me a statue just a little bit bigger of a man and a woman, and the man holding on to the woman like this. The next week, she gave me a statue about this big, really tall, right? So I asked her, I said, what are you trying to say to me? She said, honey, you can be a mother and you can be a wife. But the reason the woman is standing alone and is taller than any of the other ones is because you have to love yourself first. You have to be an individual first. That's why she stood taller. That's why she was bigger, before you can even begin to be a mother or a wife. You got to love yourself first.
A lot of the times I think I hear self-love and I think of it as like a one of those buzzwords being thrown around as just a way to kind of get people to see, but people don't really see what self-love is. And I finally did.
Guide me. It means supporting my own thriving by paying attention to my needs, including my needs of reciprocal love, joyfulness, and adventure. I have come to understand and practice this through trusting my intuition, my clairvoyance, and my own brilliance. I learned a lot from thinking about the phrase non-negotiables.
I was disgusted with my body. I was disgusted with myself. I couldn't sit with myself because I didn't understand myself.
So, I learned about self and spiritual love through allowing myself to learn myself through all my senses and through all I learn from my surroundings, including my ancestors and past loved ones who continue to influence my life.
So I think with my parents, and they were good parents, I think I didn't learn enough about self-expression. Love comes with more than just things.
Put me in a path of understanding, a deeper understanding of my mom, a deeper understanding of my lineage and the matriarchy in my family, because there's mostly women in my family, and the lineage of self-hate that I had harbored in my heart for such a long time.
Wrote about is like seeing people that you kind of idolize in a sense in your family, and they're not necessarily doing things that mirror self-love. Now,
you think of self-love just being like a selfish thing, right? But it's like, in order to build that, we need the other energy from other people. So
I think that my self-love journey has taken a lot of twists and turns. For me, I think I've been in a phase of differentiating what's self-care versus self-love. Like, I think I've always had all the rituals, like the baths and the things to do in terms of self-care. But self-love for me at this point really is linked to my spirituality.
You have to know that this is what you want. You have to know that there's no one like you. And you have to know that you are always the top priority.
Think and how you process thoughts and what's driving you and what's pushing you. And the number one thing you can rely on is others. Who can tell you anything they want to tell you all day long. But the bottom line, you got to feel it in your heart, your mind, and your soul, and push forward just on that. It's all, and I'm not selfish, trust me, but truly, it's about self.
We are all getting naked in front of you guys. Like, literally, like, if they tell you when I first came, I was like, I'm not ready about that. But now I'm just like, fuck it, let's go with it.
Like she said, reclaim your energy, reclaim the things that belong to you.
Let's go.
In here. Welcome. Thanks for making the decision to join us tonight.
It's nice meeting everybody. I'm so glad that I found this group through Mighty Studs. I'm really excited to be here.
And so you struggle. And I have one child, and my child has even told me that I feel like I poured out to him. I gave him like what my parents gave me. But sometimes it's not always about things. Maybe things played a big role for me as a kid, and my parents always giving me things. And so I guess I've always been giving my son things. So at the same time, it wasn't the things that he really needed. It was more of my attention, my love, my affection, listening to him. And I guess that's something that I didn't learn when I was with my parents, because I grew up with parents that said everything had to be quiet. You really can't say much. You got to keep what goes in the house stays in the house. You know, what goes on in the house is our business, no one else's business. And that's true to a point, but only to a point. Some things you have to be able to share with your children, because if you don't share that with them, then what they do is discover it on the internet.
Issues with mom and just seeing people in your family and you wanting love from them and not being able to love yourself because you don't feel like they love you.
Okay, so I got kind of like two parts to that, because I grew up, I'm almost 60 years old, so I grew up with some very old-fashioned parents who were born in the early 1800s and early 1900s. So a lot of the things that they instilled in me is just so different now. And you try to become the people that they are, thinking that you should raise your children in the same fashion, but you really can't.
It's about the duality of knowing that what they did, what they had is all they had, but also knowing you're allowed to be upset about it. You're allowed to have feelings about it too. You're allowed to be angry about that. You're allowed to hold that, and then, like Tracy said, release it. Because, and like Marisby said, redirect the waters, because you can't just hold it and let it harbor, because that is where the intersection, for me, that was where my intersection of self-love and self-healing began.
Yeah,
because
it's so interesting when we were talking about intergenerational traumas and like interrupting those cycles. And I know Cherie and Marizzi and I talked a lot about this in year one. That was like 2019. But looking at how like you're doing it here, but then like the mirrors and the different pieces of us that live outside of us in our people. And I didn't know that, but I'm now not surprised. I'm like, of course you are. Wow.
That's good. I still got a little ways to go. It's a long process.
Is that bad? Why is it hard to do? Where is the intersection of self-love and shame?
Seeing alcoholism or drug use or those types of things and seeing how they've affected people, and you having to unlearn those things and see how like this person taught you best, like what they knew what was best, but even you having to grow up and be like, okay, you know, I'm doing therapy now and I'm doing the work, and I'm seeing that some of the stuff that you did was traumatizing in my life. And while I know you love me, what you did on that day, that many years ago, still affects me to this day. And I can't allow you to do that to me anymore. And that has really been something that I have been working through as far as loving myself, because, you know, you want your family in your life. You feel like you can gripe with knowing that they did the best that they could do with what they have, but you also can still recognize like that wasn't love.
And my son, and I hope you all don't mind, he really wanted to be on this call. He went to work tonight, so he couldn't be on the call. He knew it was going to be women, but still, I would have loved his point of view on this as well.
A deeper understanding of what self is, self and spirit is, and then self-love is.
But thank you for just being a light in darkness in multiple places. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you. You know.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is actually our second 4-part healing series through words. The last one was Antidote, and this one is Lineage. I'm just gonna give you the rundown. We did part 1 a few months ago. That was relational love, sexual and romantic. Then part 2 was also relational love, but it was non-sexual friendships and platonic sort of relationships. The third part, the last one we did, was actually on familial or kinship. So bio family, non-bio family, however you think of family and kinship groups. We did that. And now we're on self/spiritual love.
Self-love, love of self. Where did I see that growing up? It didn't seem like a thing the way it is today. It was all about survival mode. And that too is a kind of self-love. When the self-hate and shame arises, the room for self-love shrinks. A lot of times, someone who loves me has to throw me a raft and pull me back out of those shark-infested waters. I think about tribal living. Self-love was integrated with tribe love, an interconnected love to keep the whole community safe. In these more isolating times, self-love can transform into an isolating journey. But how can we know love if not through relation? Building relationship with self, sure, but that relationship will look different depending on who raised you.
And come through, Queen.
There used to be a disconnect between my energy and my liberty. It was almost as if I had an allergy to me, myself, I, and self-love that used to fuck with my energy. See, there was no synergy. I couldn't be who I was fully destined to be because society had framed me from birth, putting me in a battle against me. And see, there was me, and then there was all the models I've seen on TV, which caused me to feel like my true identity wasn't the standard of beauty. And I was conditioned to believe it myself, so those insecurities spoke to me loudly. A size 2, then a 16, Megan knees versus the granny and me. And when I dance, you can understand the granny statement because my knees be like, bitch, please. City girls in the reality of the real world. Rich nigga, 8-figure, that's my type. But the insecurity comes in when I know what's really his prototype. Those men don't like girls like you. Now I'm in a self-fight and I'm beating my own ass to fit in a category, all because of the hype. See, I used to confuse self-love with being selfish. In reality, the thought of that had me battling life demons that made my world feel hellish. Who wants to choose to live in hell when the goal is to get to heaven, but I'm already in a mental jail admiring builder bodies because my self-hate is saying, Lynn, why be content when you could just build you a body? See, what society portrays to be beautiful made it clear that I didn't fit in. I had to adapt to society's views, my surrounding, and started to poison the original copy who was within. And the part that hurts the most is it was influenced by the people who were the closest to me. See, my family, my friends, my kin, and sometimes even men. How dare you lay with a man who don't consider you to be a gem? Be a lady, they say, you're too rough. Ladies are not supposed to be tough. Wear heels, give off a better appeal. You gonna eat that? And the words jokingly because we know you can miss a few meals. How dare me to even try to be full of me when self-hate, pain, and hurt is all I feel. See, I had to learn to heal while constantly getting cut on broken glass. But see, I understood the task. Falling in love with her was the best thing I could ever did for me. I built her and I loved her in the dark, piece by piece. See, this self-love shit don't come easy. It wasn't a breeze. So when you see her, no, that's work I put in for me.
Ooh, okay.
I've been tricked, deceived, misled to believe in the synthetic self. I don't like the self that's been enculturated. I love the resiliency, the will to be, the fluidity that comes from changing compositions and environments out of my control. I have been a controlled substance.
Fat. Granulated white crystals melt and vaporize into a boiling pot of collards, elbows, mixed cheddar and mozzarella cheeses, cream and butter, al macaroni, honey, molasses, or hickory smoked barbecue flavor affixed to the skins of drumsticks, legs, and wings, candied root vegetables baked syrupy, addicting me, the first original sin. Enabling gluttony and impossibility, we would never meet standard. Instead, healthy, thick, or big boned, we nicknamed each other, branded fat, obese, overweight, and lazy by others. We would always be aesthetically questioning, even when our curves became fashionably acceptable. Attempting to satiate my cravings with rice milk, soy cheeses, and tofu, although longing for the warmth and comfort cuisine of the culture I belong to that emanates through my skin's hue and hair's texture, and conceived me, all hips, thighs, and ass. Wonderful.
A surrender to what is and what is not, with full understanding that I am only the observer. I place no judgment, yet I light this candle and sink deeper into this awareness. Star kiss these dystopian notions that arise, whisper to ego, baby, girl, I get it. I hear you. I'm here. You can relax now. Sink into this scene with hairpins of awareness while we watch the waves of usness, scene after scene after scene. Cut! We need, then catch our breath. This shit gets heavy. Lifting emotional weight in silence. Hear the chatter of what I coulda, woulda, shoulda, but did not. The shame wraps around my throat chakra. We relax more and let that shame melt. Wash over us too. Sing.
So some of the questions we are in the midst of considering are, what is self-love? How have you come to your understanding and practices of this? Do you indulge? Shy away? Is it selfish? Is selfish bad? Selfless? What are the gendered expectations? Another who is deeply considering these questions is artist Toni Jones in her piece, Energy Budget.
Tonight, we continued our exploration of love as it relates to ourselves. In this series, so far, we've heard 6 voices on self-love in various places along their journeys. We witnessed the questions that they are currently pondering, the shifts and declarations that they are making, the deconstructing and reconstructing process they seem to be in the midst of, and that this process is informing their most current versions of self-love. Now it's time to transition all of this info into some reflection through writing. In the next 5 minutes, we will respond, reject, question, embrace, or some combination of these things that comes up when you ponder the question, what is self and spiritual love? How have you come to your understanding and practices of this?
What is spiritual self-love? How have you come to your understanding and practices of this?
Is selfish bad? You know, or to be selfless, is that bad? Things to just ponder on about yourself. Do you indulge? Do you shy away? What is selfishness? Is it selfish? You know, having self-love being selfish. What is self and spiritual love? How have you come to the understanding in practices?
A lot of my self-love practices came after struggling with self-identity, struggling with being able to identify myself within a crowd, within my lineage, within the world, and a lot of the things that I have wrote about when it comes to self-love was my own shame around what follows me, um, because of wanting to love myself, right?
But yesterday, I actually sat outside on my porch. So as she's telling you how to meditate, I'm outside in nature, and she had you close your eyes and just listen. All I heard was the birds, the air conditioners, but you felt and you understood the difference, of really just getting into the universe and into yourself and your own feelings, not so much your thoughts, but your feelings.
How does one experience self-love in a space of extreme sadness and or depression? Because we know sometimes when we sad and we're depressed, we don't see us, we just see a reflection. How does one accept wholeness self when not knowing oneself?
I was on a self-hate, I think, journey. I was the big girl. And what was beautiful to me growing up was my grandmother, my aunties, my great grandmother, and all them had skin that looked like, like chocolate. You could just, so being pale like my mom, who I did not have a good relationship with, who disappeared at 3, was something I carried for a very long time. Now, as Cherie was just speaking about spirituality and how, for me, it goes hand in hand. Because when I started my spiritual journey, I started a physical one first, losing the weight, taking my control back. But that had to go hand in hand with the spiritual. And what that did is it allowed me to work on these grudges and these relationships that are really important in the long run. Parents, siblings, those are relationships that need to be mended, and with my mother being deceased now, there was a release I did that brought me so much clarity and understanding. 5 years ago, I couldn't even say my mother. I would call her by name. And the more this transpired, the better I felt about myself, the better I talked to myself, the better I treated myself. I realized it was not selfish to put myself first. I also realized I did not have to. The more you love yourself, you realize you don't have to give till your cup is empty to be accepted. Because either you're going to love me for who I am, but I ain't going to deplenish my energy, my resources, none of that. I shouldn't have to. So self-love, for me, like Cherie said, it is in such a spiritual connection. And it's funny how when I started losing the weight, I felt good. But when I started losing the mental baggage, I started really loving myself. There's a peace that comes that you can't get nowhere else.
Does self-love stem from self-hate? That's a good one. What is the intersection of self-love and community? How does community influence self-love, and how does self-love influence community?
I also learned a lot from researching myself. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about with community love and self-love is that's paying attention to my body in very multiple ways, you know, spiritual, physical, all of the above, but in a way that isn't just like an everyday thinking about my body. For example, I did some research about these cravings. I keep getting these really, really sweet cravings late at night. And I was like, this doesn't seem normal. Like I really always crave, and it's always at nighttime. And I didn't connect it to the fact that I'm anemic. I didn't connect it to this blood disorder I have, which causes me to be anemic. And I researched and I found out that my sugar cravings are actually a need for protein. So the cravings are really, really similar. For protein, the craving feels the same as a need for sugar. And so my body kept reading it as sugar, but it was actually protein. And so now I eat like an egg when I feel, you know, or something like that when I crave protein. And so things like that just started popping up once I started to listen to my body and pay attention to my breathing, my lack of sleep. I've been an insomniac most of my life because of, you know, due to some trauma, but trying to really force myself to sleep and pay attention. And so I think that that's really similar to community, right? We have to keep supporting each other's thriving, right? And pay attention to each other's need. There is no one size fits all. And I think that that's what has made us a horrible, a lot of society be horrible, because we try to make everything one size fits all, but we don't all have the same needs. You know, we all need water and we all need sunshine, right? But we need them also at different intervals and at different lengths. And those are just basic physiological needs, you know, the mental and the psychological and the spirituals also varies very widely. And so I think authentic love comes from paying attention to our needs, and then paying attention to those that are most marginalized and those who are most disenfranchised and those that we need to lift up even more, because society is doing a shit job of taking care of.
I wanted to share something that I'm so grateful that we're having this discussion, because you know, one of the things that I was thinking about was the community aspect of self-love. And I love how Nia and Alba brought this up, which is that self-love is also looking at your ancestors and what is the relationship that your parents had to self-love and that you have with your parents. And so I think I was reflecting on it, and I feel now that self-love is inherently, even when you're doing it by yourself, you're never really doing it by yourself, because you're doing it with the spirits of your ancestors and you're doing it with your family. So I'm appreciative that you both mentioned that.
What happens if one doesn't go on this journey of self-love versus self-contentment and self-pleasure?
So nice meeting everyone. Thank you all for sharing and making me feel comfortable to share. Tracy, I really resonated with what you said, just as far as like issues with mom and just seeing people in your family and you wanting love from them and not being able to love yourself because you don't feel like they love you. And then also too, what's been kind of like a mind fuck for me, which I wrote about, is like seeing people that you kind of idolize in a sense in your family, and they're not necessarily doing things that mirror self-love. Now that I'm unlearning things, and I can just, you know, seeing alcoholism or drug use or those types of things and seeing how they've affected people, and you having to unlearn those things and see how like this person taught you best, like what they knew what was best, but even you having to grow up and be like, okay, you know, I'm doing therapy now and I'm doing the work, and I'm seeing that some of the stuff that you did was traumatizing in my life. And while I know you love me, what you did on that day, that many years ago, still affects me to this day. And I can't allow you to do that to me anymore. And that has really been something that I have been working through as far as loving myself, because, you know, you want your family in your life. You feel like you can gripe with knowing that they did the best that they could do with what they have, but you also can still recognize like that wasn't love. And that
I had a friend that was deaf, and when we used to go to church, they used to always pray like, "Oh, I want you to hear. You're gonna get healed. You're gonna do this. You're gonna do that." I remember just sitting down talking to her. She said, "You know, I'm not coming to church no more." I'm like, "Why?" Like, you know, you the center of it all, you know? And she pretty much was just saying, you know, they keep praying for my hearing and my hearing is not a problem. She was like, I got other stuff going on, and they can't even see that because they're looking at something that they feel is pretty much a problem. That's not a problem for me. She said, I go through my daily life understanding very well. She said, but I'm in church and they looking at me as being a cripple, and that's all they see. So when you talked about different weights, I was like, okay, you know, because we think, oh, because we're big women, we got to lose the weight physically, but you had a different weight. You better go, girl. You're preaching. You're preaching. When are we mimicking self-love or mimicking out of alignment with our authentic selves?
You know, I think that my self-love journey has taken a lot of twists and turns. For me, I think I've been in a phase of differentiating what's self-care versus self-love. Like, I think I've always had all the rituals, like the baths and the things to do in terms of self-care. But self-love for me at this point really is linked to my spirituality. And actually in the surrender and I think what Marisol said about the community and just the acknowledgement of needing something outside of myself, like looking for something, a connection that is deeper than self. And this phase of my life is what self-care is looking like. And like I said, the ultimate surrendering to even who I thought that I was, is looking like self-love for me right now. I think that the limitations that I placed on who I could be and where I could go and what I can do has been challenged because I got to the place of surrendering. And so that very much feels like self-love to me at this, where I am in the journey.
Kyra said, but I have a question. How can you love yourself when your parents have taught you how to do, haven't taught you how to do so? How do you love yourself when people always seem to point out your flaws?
My son attempted suicide 2 weeks ago. I immediately retired from my job. And the first thing I knew I needed to give him was what I had been lacking always, is the attention he needed. You can tell kids, oh, you're doing great, you're doing this. But if you're not listening, now you have to listen to, not to just hear, you have to listen to understand. And it makes a world of a difference. And so I'm sitting there. I didn't argue with him. I didn't tell him, no, you can't. I just listened to him. And then after he spilled it out, then I said, so what are you asking me? I wanted him to say it. What are you asking me? Are you asking me for permission? Because I'm not going to give you permission. I said, and then I started giving him all these powerful, wonderful things that he is and what he's about and who he's truly have always been. And Stephanie and Stephanie know that I am a widow, but the part of it is his dad is gone. He missed him. But
hi, Cheryl. I just want to thank you for sharing your story. And you know, I could relate about in terms of suicide. I think it's not something that we talk about a lot, but it's so common. I know myself, I had, you know, issues with suicide and suicidal thoughts, and I've had friends and family, and, you know, your presence is definitely the most healing.
oh my
And
God.
I just wanted to say that, you know, this is something that really helped for me, but just diet is huge. And we don't think a lot about what we put into our bodies sometimes. And I feel like, and this goes around to, like I said before, just other people who have dealt with mental health, is just what you put into your body really affects your brain, because they say your gut is your second brain.
It is.
So I think it's amazing that you're doing the alternative health, because I think that's going to help him, just telling him the foods to eat, the herbs to take, the teas to drink.
That kind of like I had, because it was what a big part of what I wrote about, and it's kind of like the spirit, but the externalization of it. Because for me, the spirit was equated with God. And that God looked like it was white, and it went to Catholic school. And I could not for a long time separate spirituality from religion. And I did not love myself. My love you, because with Catholicism and the guilt and all of those kinds of things, I internalized a lot of self-hate and guilt and shame that I'm still working through. So like, you know, a lot of what was shared earlier is kind of like I had put something about like acknowledgement and accept, like it's kind of like a cycle, constantly going through cycles. And when we were writing this, the one thing I had to remind myself was that spiritual love is not clean. It's very messy. It's spacious. It can be, you know, and I had to like confront that, unlearn all of the doctrine and the fear that was instilled, because once again, you know, you taught that you're not, excuse my language, but you ain't shit, you know, is this white Jesus on this cross, and, you know, and it was just like, okay, well, who am I? What am I? And at first accepting that, yeah, all right, you're a divine spirit, but divinity does not mean like sanctification through and through. Sometimes it is ugly and it's toxic, and you have to go through that and clean it out. You have to consistently clean it out. So one of the things that's kind of helped, just to kind of take into what the question was like, I've kind of made this my mantra and around interrupting the flow of the water to redirect it. If it, you know, it's gonna get muddy. Water comes in, it's in three forms. It's gas, it's liquid, it's solid, and it's going to be in your spiritual environment in every form. But at some point you might have to just stop what's going on to change that ecosystem, and it's a constant maintenance. So.
And that has been really hard, and I have some shame around that, because I mean, essentially me, I know for myself, I people in my life that I love and I respected, I tend to mirror their behaviors, and in unlearning things and doing inner work and seeking my own spirituality, and like, you know, Marizzi said, interrupting those muddy waters, I'm finding that, you know, what I idolized or what I saw was wrong. And it's hard to see that in someone that you loved, and someone that raised you, and someone that you had up on this pedestal, and you have to bring them down to like, they were just doing the best they can. They were human. Try not to resent. That has been a part of my self-love journey, just kind of forgiving myself for the things that I've done, but also having to forgive people that I know that are loving me the best way that they know how.
Good. One thing people don't realize in life is that we're all 2 seconds from happy to sad, sane to insane. Anybody can change in a heartbeat. There is no doubt there. We all have that in us.
Sometimes we sit in our self-disgust, right? And we begin to like, we know that there's a tomorrow, right? And we know that depression is real. And I believe that we begin to put on like masks, and then we learn mask after mask after mask. And it's almost like we're deleting ourselves like if we're Instagram pics.
Because now I have to go into that journey of, well, they didn't, I don't see them, I don't understand that I'm not aligning here anymore. But that's not wrong, because what they knew, what they had, and they did with the best that they could. And now I'm on a different journey, and I'm scared because I'm by myself, but I know that this is what I write in my spirit, in my soul, in myself. I know this is the right path for me. And it was hard to make those decisions of what's the right path sometimes, especially when you love the women in your family, you cherish the women in your family. You want to be, honestly, for me, it's like, I want to, you know, do the best I can for them. I want to give them everything I want to make them proud, right? That's what it is. I want to make them proud. And with that coming of sense of making them proud, I lose myself. I always do. And it's because I'm looking to them to gauge how much self-love I deserve. And that's not fair to them or to me, because they've raised me for as much as they can. They did all the best they could until I'm an adult now. So for me to look back on them and say, you didn't love me right, is fair, but it's also a cop out. Now it's time to go, how do I love myself right? What do I do to love myself right? What do I do to make myself the pinnacle of my love? Because self-love is a pinnacle of love. When you love yourself, there is nothing but love that radiates from you, you know? So when I hear Tracy and Steph and Dory and all these beautiful women that I have come to cherish and appreciate and value on my journey of self-love, I know that it's okay to have both feelings. And I've had to learn that. I've had to be able to be okay with, I'm upset because you didn't do it, but then I can't be mad for too long because I now have to find my own way.
She was talking about like mantras, and a couple people mentioned things like that. And I wanted to say that it took a long time for me to understand my parents' trauma and to not relate it to myself. And it comes from me being very angry at them and experiencing a lot of pain from very big isms, not only their sexism, but their anti-Blackness, their classism, all this shit, and then I'm like, well, duh, they grew up in a time where they had to survive with their anti-Blackness. They had to be anti-Black to try to survive. And then I had to keep telling myself, but that's not my reality anymore. Like, I can fight that, I can do better. And so last year I started to say myself, it was like my mantra for yoga. I kept saying, let go. That was my mantra. Let go, let go. I have to let go of their past. And this year I saw a meme and it was like my mantra for this year. And I love it. And it ran in my family until it ran into me. And then it says, say it again. It ran in my family until it ran into me. And so I was writing how I feel like a lot of guilt. I struggled a long time with this, like, what do I deserve? My parents experienced a lot of trauma. My mother went to these Indian reservation schools that we're hearing about on the news. She was whipped and beat and abused all sorts of ways by priests, and my dad is an Indigenous person. My mom's Afro-Indigenous, my dad is Indigenous. So there's all this kind of anti-Indian, there's all this kind of hiding our culture, hiding our religion, our spirituality, because we can be targeted. And so I learned now to be like, well, that's not thriving. They're in survival mode. Our parents are stuck in survival mode. A lot of this trauma that they have is linked to them trying to just make it in the world that is so harsh and violent. But we don't need to carry that. And so one of the things, even with like the fat phobia and all the phobias, and the hatred, the self-hatred that I learned, I just keep having to remind myself, like, their trauma isn't mine. I have to heal through mine, find therapy, friends, community, and then also make space away from them, because my parents haven't done the same kind of healing. And so sometimes I just need to, make extra space between us so that the love can build in other ways. Because I know some of their shit just ain't going to go away. It's going to be there for a long time. And so to be healthy, I also have to separate myself sometimes from, the kind of the gross stuff they say sometimes. Yeah.
I hate to close us out. I mean, we get to this point every time when we're in the room together and we have to shift into closing it out, and we're always in the meat of this stuff. And I just want to do that with the most love and sort of like wrapping it up as we can. Some stuff came up in the room, so I want to clear it. And I'm gonna do our song bowl. Any of the things that you wrote that you would like to share, I'm gonna drop the link in here. It doesn't have to be a poem, just your reflections on our 5 minutes on self-love, spiritual love. I'll drop that in there in a moment. And then I'll just put it up in the background so you can see where it lands, because it gets published on our the BGC part of the Freeeedom Tour site. So put it in there. We put it up and it's out there for other people to go through pieces of themselves. The idea is that we want to live. We don't want to always be in a state of healing. So let's get this healing so we can live.
This is very powerful. It is very powerful. I love what she just said. It's very powerful.
Can I just say it's an honor creating with all of you beautiful women? Like, it's an honor to know and then to create such a beautiful space and open conversation with all of you beautiful women and all of you people that have showed up and allowed this space to be a sacred space. I appreciate all of you.
But we just want to thank you. I mean, thank you for being in this sacred space with us. Thank you for being so vulnerable, for opening up, and for just for showing the parts of you that, I mean, I don't know about y'all, but like, we don't just do this out in the world. So it is such a gift to be here, to hold space, to be in the space, and to receive, observe, witness, and to be in this with y'all. So thank you.
Thank you, ladies, for coming. Until next month, until we meet again. Adios.
Adios.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Bye.
Good night.
Good
Night.
Good night, guys.
Guys.
As you leave, feel liberated to drop any of your information in the chat. Like if you have a business or healing spaces or other ones that you love and support and want us to connect with, drop all that stuff in there, because we're just a community loving on each other, loving ourselves, trying to expand and support one another. So whatever, just drop it in there. We're going to save the chat like we always do. And then we might start hitting you up like, oh, you dropped this in the chat. Tell me